Hey everybody, today is Monday, April 10th, 2023. Coming up on the show today, from the new movie Air, editor Billy Goldenberg.
The way it was presented was like, oh, it's a little film, it'll be easy to cut, and we're going to do it really fast, and you don't even need any help. And then we're like getting 5-6 hours of dailies, and they started shooting 5 cameras, and it was like, we need some help. I mean, you want to see a highlight reel of Michael Jordan, you can watch 1,000 of them. It wasn't about that. It was about the price of fame. It was about the price of adulation. In that particular scene with Marlon and Matt, I don't know if I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this.
Yes, all that and a lot more in this edition of The Rough Cut. Well, hey there, my friends. Thanks for visiting today. I guess technically I'm the visitor, which is weird because I don't know where you are. No matter, wherever you may be, we are together once again to talk to a fantastic editor. Making a return trip to the podcast is Oscar-winning editor William Billy Goldenberg. The last time Billy joined us, he was on to talk about cutting the film News of the World starring Tom Hanks, and that was a good time. Billy had a lot of interesting things to say, and you should go back and check it out if you haven't heard it yet. If for no other reason, then you get to hear Billy talk about working with Richard Pryor, which I could not get enough of. Now, the film that brings Billy back to us today is the Ben Affleck-directed Air. It is the story of how a young college basketball phenom named Michael Jordan signed a deal with Nike, who at the time had nothing going on in the world of basketball. And together they would release the Air Jordan line of basketball sneakers. It's a really great story, which is why Ben Affleck needed a really great editor. Now, for Ben and Billy, this would be their 4th film together. Their second, Argo, resulted in Billy winning an Oscar. Including Argo, Billy's been nominated for an Oscar 5 times. Wow. He should probably stick with his editing thing. Anyway, there's so much to talk about Air with Billy. And one of the things I think will surprise you is this.
Yeah, you've noticed there's no composer credit on the movie. None of the score is original score. All the score was stuff we found from 80s movies.
Well, I don't know about you, but this sounds like the perfect time to bring up our beloved podcast sponsor, Extreme Music. Sure, you can score your movie with pieces of scores from other movies. Billy did it. But my advice to you is to put a call into Extreme Music so you can get access to their enormous catalog of production audio. With their simple-to-use website, you can easily search for any kind of music you need. Original compositions from the biggest names in movie music are right there at your fingertips. All you got to do is tell them what you're looking for. And by tell them, I mean enter metadata like tempo, style, composer, lyrics, the decade, especially if you're going to be making an 80s movie like Billy. And then Extreme Music will go out and find you just what you need. And since we are, as a human race, on the precipice of artificial intelligence and our certain doom, you can even upload a track of your own to Extreme Music, and they will analyze it left, right, and center to find you ones like it. No matter which way you decide to go, they'll even give you more options for track length and instrumentation. So the next time you have a movie to make or a TV show to produce, make sure to visit our friends and Rough Cut sponsor, Extreme Music. All right, game on. Time to lace up our Air Jordans and hit the court with Air editor Billy Goldenberg. Because it's kind of nice to just like see a nice story. So thank you for that.
I agree. And it was so fun to work on. I mean, I have a whole new sort of attitude about what movies I want to work on, or in this case, make. I so enjoyed making something that was sort of inspirational and fun, and people leave the theater feeling better than when they walked in. I mean, I've done a lot of movies I'm really proud of that's not necessarily true about. So it was fun to do something where you can see smiles on people's faces at the end.
There were a lot of smiles. There were a lot of laughs. I thought we would start with kind of a random question. What was the last thing that you were working on before the edit was done?
Well, in this particular film, I mean, I don't think you'd be surprised. The scene where Matt is pitching Michael to come sign it, like he stops they're showing them like a highlight reel that they put together that he wasn't so happy. The character wasn't so happy about showing anyway. And he could see that Michael and his mother are sort of just like bored, and he knows it's not going well. Howard White, played by Chris Tucker, is looking at him like it's not going well, and he stops the video and pitches Michael. That was a really difficult sequence to get right. It just took a lot of trial and error to find the right balance of, historical clips and what's on camera, what's not on camera. And there's some additional dialogue we added that is off camera. getting the speech to be the right length, the right feel. And so that was the sequence that we worked the hardest on. And then the sequence, I mean, there were little doodads we worked on, like trim a shot, change a shot in the main title. But that sequence was certainly the one we worked hardest and longest on.
The funny thing about this movie, it's a sports movie without any sports, and it's a biopic that never really shows its subject. What did you think of this script? And was there anything about it that made you think maybe that might not work the way that Ben wants it to, or we're going to have to pay a little extra attention to this scene here?
It's funny. I read the script late because they were constantly revising it, and Ben told me the whole story, so I felt like I knew everything in the script, but I hadn't read it until, I'm guessing, like 3 weeks to a month before shooting, which is pretty late. Everything was a really fast prep. We shot it in 23 days. They shot it in 23 days, which is crazy. And the same sequence I was talking about earlier, because we're sort of going outside the movie with historical clips showing Mike what's happening to his future, which is a subject that a lot of people know about because he's such a public figure. So I knew, and we both knew going in that was going to take the most trial and error experimentation, because we didn't know. I mean, originally as scripted, it was way more video footage and way less Matt as written, but it turned into a highlight reel. It turned into like a little documentary, and we finally figured out that it needs to be snapshots of his life. I mean, you want to see a highlight reel of Michael Jordan, you can go on YouTube and watch 1,000, because I've watched them all. You can watch 1,000 of them, and you can watch, The Last Dance. And so it wasn't about that. It was about the price of fame. It was about the price of adulation. And we wanted to just show snapshots of what that would look like for Michael and the trials and tribulations he would be going through. Because, I mean, I think some of that is Ben and Matt speaking to what they've been through. I mean, I'm just speculating, because, there's a price to fame, and you have to know that going in, but you're still going to do, with Michael, you're still going to do great things, and it's worth it. And the movie kind of hinges on that, because the audience has to believe they pitched Michael in such a strong way that he was willing to sign with a company that there was no expectations of him even coming to see them, let alone signing. So a lot of the film from that point forward hinged on that scene really working beautifully. And it was actually both in the only 2 times I've ever seen the film with an audience. At the preview and at the premiere, people applauded at the end of that scene. And it was very, very satisfying because, as difficult scenes always do, they go through periods where they don't work at all. You haven't working a little and you go this way, you go that way, and it's not, and it makes it worse, makes it the same. But then to finally unlock, the thing to the point where you feel like it's really strong, was really satisfying. So, and then to have the audience bear that out it made me smile a lot. Let's put it that way.
I can see why. Well, this isn't the first time you've done a film about a historical figure or historical event, but this is a figure that's still very much fresh in the public consciousness. I asked you about the script and any thoughts about that. The other thing I considered was, well, this is a story where the audience already knows the ending. And I guess what kind of pressure does that put on you as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, to create tension and create interest when the ending is already known?
You're right. I've done a lot of those. I mean, Argo, for instance, with Ben, same thing. Ali, The Imitation Game. I'm sure there's 4 or 5 more. I think with those, you want suspension of disbelief. You want the audience to be on the ride so that they forget they know the ending, at least for that moment. And I think the key to that is to make every scene as engaging as possible. I mean, I know it seems silly to say, but to make sure every scene is as engaging as possible so that the audience is so in it. They're just with the story and they don't even, that part of their mind is shut off. They're just involved in the story. They forget. They're rooting for Sonny. And in this case, nobody knows about Sonny. So, and I find him a really lovable character, and somebody who takes risks and somebody who is flawed. And I think the key to this one was getting them so involved with Sonny, Matt's character, that they're just rooting for him personally. And I think that's the key to those kind of, in this particular film anyway, was just having the audience so rooted with Sonny and his need to succeed, his belief in Michael before anybody else believed. I think that was the key to, and Matt is, I think maybe, especially now that I've cut the film, this is my first film with him in it. I think is maybe the most underrated actor in Hollywood. I mean, he's spectacular and makes it look so easy that, I think you don't really realize how good he is. I mean, he's such a good guy, and he's so smart. Like, 'cause we did a lot of collaboration in the cutting room. The fun thing about this movie was I was cutting in the same building they shot the Nike offices in. I was in the first floor where wardrobe and hair and makeup and everything was right there. And like, there were times where I would open my door for my cutting, a little hallway for my cutting room, and they would be shooting right there, like, so because I was able to stay up to camera by working 16 hours a day, they were able to see things in real time. Like, they would shoot something, I have a cut the next day, and they'd come in and look at parts of the film and go, wait a second, we need transition here, or we need to, this is too fast. There's something missing here. And the three of us would sit around and kick around ideas and like, how about this? How about that? And it was just so much fun. And especially with those two guys, because they're geniuses. And we'd come upon an idea that we sort of all agreed on. And they go, okay, we'll be right back. And they would run out and go shoot it. And then the next day I'd have it cut it in. And it would be like, that works great. It was like making a really, I mean, I wouldn't even say a college film because I don't even know what to say. It was like a run and gun thing for so much of it, because they were shooting so fast and I was cutting fast, and they were constantly adding because they would see things I cut and then go out and add something to it, or we need like to beef up this moment, like, and just add another shot of Matt doing whatever. And it was just really fun and really collaborative. And it was the first time I've ever had that experience where like Albert Brooks says in broadcasting, is you say it here and it comes out there.
I always saw you as the Albert Brooks of editorial. Now that you've worked in that kind of model, this is the way to do it? Or is that not always the right approach?
I think it's specific to the movie. This is a movie that's very contained. A lot of it takes place in offices, and we were able to, we had the location the whole time. You know what I mean? It's like if you're shooting at Fenway Park, like in the town, you don't get to go back to Fenway Park. You know what I mean? It's a bigger deal. It's like you can run over to Fenway Park. Okay, we're going to shoot it. So it's a little bit movie dependent, or what the film is dependent to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's to be able to cut fast and have them build in the time to do that. I think it's because you'll never know until you see it. I mean, it's never exactly how the director has it or the writer has it in their mind. It never comes out exactly like that. So it's so great to be able to. They were working fast, so they had a lot of time. I was working fast, so that was able to give them instant feedback, so that they were able to. I think that other movies could do that, but it might not be like, I'm going to go run down the hall and do it.
Well, so you had this very rewarding, very intense, collaborative situation with Matt and Ben. What about the star of the film, Michael Jordan himself? Did you have any interaction with him? Was he involved at all?
No, not at all. Actually, Ben spent a day with him. Ben, I knew him. I think so. I'm not sure about this. I think from like the poker world, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But he knew him somehow, just famous people,
Yeah,
There's a famous people club. When I was with Catherine on Zero Dark 30, we were at the Sony lot, and Adam Sandler walked by, and I was walking with Catherine. We walked by, and they kind of nodded to each other, and I said, "Do you know him?" And she said, "No, not at all." And I said, "Oh, I just thought, famous people club thing, But anyway, he knew Michael, so he called him up, and he went down to Florida and spent the day with him, because if Michael didn't agree to the principle of making this movie, he wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
He said that to Michael, like, if you're not up for this, if you don't want this, I'm not going to do it. But Michael didn't. He was like, yeah, go make it. But I think he didn't have anything against it. And he gave Ben incredible insight. And there's a lot of things in the movie that a lot of things from that meeting that went directly into the film. I mean, I think originally Michael's father was much more weighted towards his father being the influence. And then when Ben spoke to Michael made it clear that it was, he said, I think this is not a direct quote, but I think he said, My father was a great guy, had phenomenal personality, but my mom ran shit. And that line's in the movie, you know, like when Matt says, "What about the parents?" And they're great, but she runs shit. And like he made it clear that the George Raveling character was incredibly important. And it says in the end of the movie how without Raveling's support for Nike, he would have never signed with Nike. So that's why that scene's in the movie, the scene with Raveling in the bar, because when Raveling was assistant coach on the Olympic team, he was best man at Sonny's wedding, and they had some kind of rift falling out. So I don't think they're friends anymore. But he said it was without Raveling, it never would have happened. So they added that scene into the movie. And it just so happened that Raveling had this incredible story of doing security for when Martin Luther King made his "I Had a Dream" speech. So it added like another layer of history to it that was just like a great coincidence that he had, you know, and they were able to use that use that example of what King did to, you know, sort of making up the second half of the speech because he thought it wasn't going well. I think that obviously plays into what Sonny does in the boardroom. It plays into, you know, believing, you know, in something and just sort of going with it and following your instincts. And, you know, so they were able to weave it into the story in a really beautiful way. And I think it really helped it. So, and there were other things too, but those are the two that come to mind. And then he also said, and you may have heard Ben say this in an interview, he also said, Viola Davis has to play my mother.
Right.
I was like, well, I'll ask. I mean, it doesn't work that way. You know, she's Viola Davis. And luckily, and I was so excited. I mean, when I found out she was going to do it, because like everybody, I mean, you know, so he asked Viola and she had some input into, you know, every actor really had input into their own character and they would make adjustments. I mean, I think that happens a lot, but it seemed to happen for every character in this film. They had something to say about, and they would shape the characters based on, you know, actor feedback. And I know Viola I don't know specifically, but I know she had a lot to say about, you know, her portrayal of Deloris and how that would go. So, yeah, so it worked out. And I think Deloris and Viola spoke on the phone the other day. That's what I understand, which I don't know how that went, but I'm sure, you know, Viola becomes the hero of the story, you know, so I'm sure she appreciated it.
You would think, yeah. Obviously, being about the birth of the Air Jordan, Michael Jordan joining forces with Nike, the film takes place in the 80s. Through the production design, the wardrobe, the props, the archival footage, and certainly the needle drops, and the last two I'll ask you about some more, you know that this film takes place in the 80s. But I also couldn't help but feel that also the editing was evocative of the 80s, and I can't quite explain why. Like, if there is a style to that era in terms of cutting.
No, I didn't. I never really intended that. I mean, you know, maybe because of the style and of the production design and the style of shooting, and maybe it lent to that. You know, but it wasn't something I was looking at movies from the 80s and saying like I want to emulate that. You know, no, I mean, I cut the movie dictated by performance and dictated by story, and that, you know, and one of the up-tempo pace because of the fact that there was all this pressure about the competition between the three sneaker companies. So it was more that was more what led to anything that dictated the style of the editing, not so much like 80s stuff.
Let me give you a breadcrumb of maybe why I went down that road, is that I seem to notice that there was a lot of cutting before the delivery ended.
In this particular film, I mean, I think it was, especially like in the scene with Marlon and Matt in the bar, you know, some of that is I'm cheating a little bit in certain things, but a lot of it is like, and I didn't learn this from Artie Schmidt directly, but Michael Mann told me that this is the way Artie cut. It's like, it should be almost like a push-pull thing. Like when, I hope I'm explaining this well, like the end of one cut pushes the head of the other cut, you know, and I'm always trying, and I always have it in my mind because I think it's such a brilliant way to think about it. Like it gives the cuts energy. So I think a lot of it is that it's like to induce energy and make the film feel like it's pulling you through it more, you know, that it's like pulling the audience through it. Like it's always forward momentum is created that way. And I think this film, that sort of style really lent itself to this film. You know, there's certain things as your career goes on that people say, you know, people like Artie or Michael Kahn or Dov Honig or, you know, these older editor. I mean, I'm an older editor, but things I've learned, and then they'll tell you 50 things, but 3 things will like stick in your mind forever. And there's certain like more from Michael Kahn because I worked for him for 4 years. But that when Michael told me that about Artie, it was like that makes so much sense. Like I love that, So I'm always thinking about that. So I would say that that's probably what induces that.
Well, your answer was a lot more clear than my question, so congratulations on that. So you mentioned earlier, like, hey, I think I've probably seen every clip of Michael Jordan doing something amazing that's been shot. Tell me a little bit about sourcing and organizing all that archival footage that you use so much as connective tissue to keep the film together.
Well, there's a lot of archival footage combined with what looks like archival footage in the opening, the main title. A lot of that it was intended to like feel just like it would have felt if it was shot at Nike in 1984. And that's very much what Nike looked like in 84. I mean, we use reference photos and Ben and other people on the set shot a ton of 8mm, 16mm and video footage, like crude video that we use and combine that with cultural stuff that was happening, political, cultural, what was happening in the 80s, because this is so much about, the culture of sneakers and this sort of back to the spine of the movie that I think I'm trying to think that was always the idea in the script phase was always the idea for the opening. So that, a lot of that I found, not the stuff they shot. Ben would make select rolls of all the stuff they shot and just send it over with music against it. And then I found all the shots of the old cell phones and Walter Mondale and Reagan and Where's the Beef and all that. And it's kind of when I was in my mid-20s in the 80s. Yeah, mid-20s in the 80s. So that's kind of my era. So I knew all that stuff and put the shot of the Dunkin' Donuts guy in there for Ben. and then, the archival footage that's Michael, some of it was in the script and some of it wasn't. And I found all of it. And, we had a stock footage person that helped us, but you sort of, whenever there's a stock footage or archivalist working, you're sort of working hand in hand with them. Everybody's looking, everybody's finding stuff. I went through millions, there are thousands anyway, of different ideas and different clips. And, just to find the little piece that plays before the Arthur Ashe commercial that Matt gets the original idea, a dedicated sneaker for Michael. That I went through, I don't even know how many different segments of different sports talk shows, or I can't remember what I had, ESPN, Sports Center from 1984. And we, it was, product of like what we can license, what we cannot license, what can be fair use, what can't be fair use. So there was a lot of back and forth and changing out things right to the very end. In fact, that Roy Firestone clip, even after I finished the movie, they were like, I don't know, I wasn't a part of it, but they were back and forth with ESPN and Roy Firestone. And, so there's a lot of like, we can use this, we can't use this, we have to change it. We want the same idea, but like to get the same feeling. So what can I find? And Deb Ricketts, our stock footage person, did a great job feeding me stuff. And, I'd come up with an idea for stuff, put something in that was sort of a placeholder. She'd find something better. My assistant would find something. It was a constant, ever-changing thing.
Well, so I walked away from the movie with the assumption that a lot of that stuff, not a lot of it, but a fair amount of the intercutting to archival was left to your discretion, because I don't know how so much you script for that. And also, it wasn't always used in the way you would think traditionally something like that would be used. Certainly, Sonny is looking at tapes of Michael playing, but there were also times it felt like you would cut to a archival clip just sort of almost thematically. Like it wasn't necessarily part of that scene where we should be looking at an archival shot.
Obviously, especially with Ben and I, always a real collaboration. And sometimes he has an Avid at his home and he'll send me little bits he's cut, and then I hopefully will take them and improve them or change them. And, it's a lot of back and forth with us. So, we really are a team. He's, at least in his mind, a really good editor. And by that, he may not be able to use the buttons very well, but he thinks like an editor. So you get the sense of what he's trying to do. So, it was really, I couldn't, it's almost like, I don't know where one of us ends and one of us begins in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like it's, especially in the scene with Sonny in the boardroom, because like I said, we went through so many different versions, and he would go down the wrong road, and then I would go down the wrong road, and then I would go down the right road, and he would piggyback on that and, stuff like that. So, and you're right. I mean, just even in the same as the music, as like you said, there's a lot of needle drops, but sometimes, and it wasn't sometimes about the lyrics, it was about the feel. A lot of times it wasn't about the lyrics, it was just about the feel and the energy of it. And it just felt right, and I think that's sort of the same for the archival stuff. It just felt right. And it wasn't necessarily exactly what you'd expect. And that way I think it makes it fresh and gives it energy and, because it's unexpected.
Well, this is probably a good time to transition to talking about the needle drops, because this film is packed with them.
Mm-hmm.
Like by the time it was over, I thought, I don't know what their budget for this movie was, but like 80% of it had to go to licensing these songs. Every hit from the 80s was in there. Was it Ben? Was it you figuring things out? How did you come to that classic 80s playlist that makes up this film?
I would say that it was probably 80% Ben. He had it in his mind. I can't. It's not far off from the beginning of shooting. He said, like, I think I want to do a lot of songs in this movie, and I thought it was a great idea. And he gave me a playlist of 100 songs. I don't know. I can't something like that. That were his favorites, and I had my favorites. But and a lot of them, we had a lot of crossover. So I would pick from the library. Sometimes go outside the library and put songs in. We changed a lot, it was a ever evolving thing, even right up to the end. And near the end, it was evolving because of licensing, because of cost. Like we had a song that was somebody wanted like $1 million for a song. We're like, well, I'm not paying that. It's not worth it for 12 seconds of a song, So we would find alternatives, and we have Andrea von Forrester, who is the music supervisor, did an amazing job. Because I don't know if you even know, but like all the score, none of the score is original score. All the score is from 80s movies.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you've noticed there's no composer credit on the movie. All the score was stuff we found from 80s movies. So most of that I did from picking from 80s movies,
And some of them you cut, probably.
I don't know.
Was anything from The Breakfast Club in there?
No, there wasn't, but there was a couple of cues from Firestarter in there and there's a bunch of Tangerine Dream in there that we use. And I worked on Firestarter as an apprentice, not an editor. I'd be 100. So, like I said, we would do a lot of song swapping at the end because the budget had ballooned so big that we couldn't afford every song. So we would carefully find out, okay, well, that's this much money. Let's find something that's just as good for cheaper. And Ben had ideas. I had ideas. Andrea, everybody calls her Avon, she had ideas. Corey Milano, our music editor, had great ideas. He did a terrific job. And he's a young guy. He wasn't even born in the 80s, but he did it. He knew he knew 80s music backwards and forwards. So he had great ideas for not only for songs but for temp score as well. I'd say it was really between Corey and I we found most of the score, and Ben found most of the songs. I would say that's how it kind of evened out. But it was so interesting how the score feels like a unified score, because the 80s had a feel, a lot of the score, and we tended to go towards that kind of music that all fit together. So that was really fun to do. All these, like, sometimes I would know the scenes, because there were movies I've seen. I know what scene that's from, and there's one piece of temp music that actually is from a more modern score, temp music that we acquired. I don't know if anybody's I assume somebody's done that before. I don't really know if anybody, but I don't really know what films. But it was just really fun to do. And we that came to us like a few weeks into shooting, because Ben was liking the temp music I was putting in, and I was putting in music from the 80s. And he was just like, why don't we just use all temp music? Has anybody ever done that? Like, I said, can we afford that? So it kind of came out. I don't know what the final, what was more expensive, having a composer or buying temp score, but it was really fun to do. That's why the music credits, if you watch the roll up at the end, the music credits go on forever.
Yeah. Well, something I noticed, but I wasn't going to ask you, but now that you're giving me this lesson in music licensing, the scene where Sonny and Graveling meet, ZZ Top's Legs plays as you're going in, but it's not the original recording.
No, it's a live version. And because whoever represents the band said you can license it I think it was, you can license it, but we want you to use this version of it. And I don't know if it was I can't remember why. Maybe it was, but we got it for a better price. But it was, it was very close to the original, and it was kind of had a rougher kind of feel to it. So it was cool because it was like very recognizable, but slightly different. There's another track in there where we use a live version too, which I am blanking on right now, but same idea. They say, we'll license it, but we want to use this version. The rap song that we play when you first meet Chris Messina's character, David Falk, that was like an alternate version of the song that was very close. We're like, sure. I mean, that's because it's a little bit different. It has a little bit of freshness to it.
So before we get off the subject of needle drops entirely, one other thing I thought I noticed is that none of it is diegetic. It is all just playing over top. I mean, and there's certainly scenes, Sonny driving down the road, you could have that starting, coming from his speakers and then transitioning to full.
Well, sometimes we do that. I mean, we did that in a few places where you go source, scourse, I guess is the word you use. Like,
oh, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, when in Blister in the Sun, after the casino scene, that kind of goes in the car, out of the car, so a little bit of that. I mean, and it's so seamless because I think in my mind, because Andy Nelson mixed the movie, who's to me the best mixer in Hollywood, and he just did such a great job of making it feel like appropriate. Just the ins and outs felt so smooth, and just the way where he did it. But I think playing it loud because it gave it a burst of energy. Playing it like on top, not every time, but I think the song's "Good Feeling." The other Violent Femme song that plays over with Sunny the night before, that kind of plays more like score. It was a kind of case by case basis, but the songs just gave the movie a burst of energy, a good feeling. Not to use the title of the song, but I don't know. It just felt right. I mean, that's literally the reason.
It felt right is kind of the answer to every editing question. So as long as you're shouting out members of the sound team, who on the sound team do you work with most closely? Supervising sound editor, re-recording mixer, sound designer? Who are you interacting with most often?
Well, it depends on the movie, obviously. I have heavy effects, like a Transformers film. It's like going to be Eric Adol, who does all the sound. He's the genius behind all the robot sounds. So mostly you're talking to him. On this film, it was kind of split between Susan Dawes and Eiling
Lee?
Yes, thank you. And they're both so understated about their jobs, just their personalities, but so good at them at the same time. And Eiling is so quiet and unassuming, but she had great ideas, and all the little all the little touches of sound design are all her ideas. Because I did some things in the editing room too, but she actually brought a lot to it with sound design that's, I think, subtle and really works, in the context of the film, doesn't stick out, but it feels cool and fits into the film. So that I think on this film, it was both, because I work with Susan a lot, because I mostly did would supervise the ADR with her and the two of us in the room with the actors or on Zoom. And Eileen brought a lot, but a lot of the stuff she brought to it came near the mix because, just the way the schedule was, we were moving so fast that by the time she got a lot of sound design in, we were on the mixing stage, because it was a very brief schedule. I mean, we started shooting June 2nd, and on August 2nd, we had a friends and family screening.
Oof.
2 months from the start of shooting. I said, because I remember we had it at Ben's house because he has a screening room, and we were walking out, and I said, it's 2 months to the day since you started shooting. He was like, wait a second, is that true? He was like adding on his fingers, because that's how fast we moved. So, and then we were snap our fingers on the dubbing stage. But I would say on this film, it was kind of split.
Well, let's give equal time to the picture side. Robert Richardson, the cinematographer who also did Ben's film Live by Night, which you got.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I ask about him is there's a lot going on in camera in this film. Like, we'll go back to that scene with Sonny and George. Single shot rack focusing back and forth between the two characters. Lots of 360 shots going in one direction, then cut going back in the other direction. I don't typically get a lot of positive responses in terms of like, yes, I do talk to them. When I ask editors about, do you collaborate or communicate at all with the cinematographer to talk about things like that?
Well, Bob and I have a great relationship, but he's the master. I would never I would certainly never make a suggestion to him. I think it would be like, I don't know. I can't give you an example, like telling Michael Jordan how to like take a jump shot. But like Bob and I get along great, and I'm in awe of him. But in that particular scene with Marlon and Matt, I don't know if I'm not sure I'm allowed to say this, but Ben actually did a lot of operating on that scene. I had two cameras that Bob shot, or Bob and his operators, and then Ben picked up a camera, and a lot of that sort of rack back and forth stuff and like the sort of shakier stuff was Ben's footage actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me make it a little easier on you. We'll just use a specific example, and that's a 360 shot. So we got, this is something we've seen plenty of times in films with a bunch of people sitting around a table or standing talking face to face and the camera's circling them.
That was all Bob. I mean, Bob, and I don't know who thought of the idea because I wasn't on set all that much. But yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like it was just like this, it gave you that feeling of like, especially the first time when, are we going to get a meeting with him? But like, and there, Jason Bateman walks in and the camera's moving around like this. And then, we switch pan here and I just love that sequence. It has so much energy and it gives you that feeling of like sort of the immediacy of like how fast they were moving and how much was at stake. And it just, I don't know, gave it it really induced a lot of energy.
I'm going to go off script here, which means I'm totally going to screw up this interview, but you brought up Jason Bateman. I can't remember off the top of my head the person he's portraying.
Rob Strasser.
Thank you. But going back to the notion of it being a story, well, not a story that everybody knows, but an outcome that everybody knows. His character has sort of a moment where he's talking about, he's recently divorced, I believe, and he can only see his daughter for 4 hours on a Sunday, and he always brings her a new pair of Nikes. And it's his kind of one way of connecting with her. And that, to me, that scene right there is what adds gravitas to the outcome of this. It's not, it's going to be hard to get people to care if a giant shoe company makes this big deal with a soon-to-be megastar basketball player. When you bring it down to this father and his daughter and their relationship and a lot of this having an impact in a way on that, just tell me a little bit about that element of it. Did you dial that up or down in terms of how much you wanted that to impact the film?
That scene was always in the script. And Jason did a beautiful job with it. And it does what you say it does. I mean, it adds stakes to the film. It adds human stakes. It's not like, oh, they didn't make a deal, but Nike's still $1 billion company. Who cares? But we also tried to play very much into everybody who worked there. That's why we show them in the main title. That's why when Matt thinks the deal has gone south, he walks out into the bullpen and sees all these faces and knows like they're going to shut the basketball division and it's my fault. And because what Jason says is like, the people work here, no more, they close the basketball, no more checks, no more money, no more this, no more that. And it's like, and with Jason, this will severely affect my relationship with my daughter. I mean, and it's just not just about, I can't bring her the shoes anymore, but it's just letting Matt know that he even says you're being reckless and not just yourself, but everybody else here. And that, and that we try to play into that as much as possible because it's this company where human beings work. You hear this now, like, Facebook laid off 10,000 people because, those are real people with real jobs. It's like everybody just looks at numbers and, Facebook, they're a multi-billion-dollar company. Who cares? But, those people who have those jobs care. They got to go find new jobs. They can't make ends meet. I mean, not all those people aren't making Zuckerberg money, so that's, the film's about that. I mean, really, it really is. It's about the human part of it, these are real people's lives.
So I'd like to ask you a couple of questions or a question about a couple of different roles in the editorial department, because I think people starting out might see those in the credits and not necessarily understand what they are. Everyone knows what the editor does, the assistant editor, VFX editor, an additional editor. Sometimes somebody gets brought in to help or an assistant gets bumped up because they did a little cutting. Jennifer Stellema is listed as associate editor. What does an associate editor do?
In this particular case, I mean, it wasn't that she did very much cutting. It's just, I think it was a way to just show her how much we valued her. I mean, she did such an exceptional job because at the very beginning, and I tend to, give my assistants, especially ones that I've had for a while, a bump their credits up because I think it helps their careers. It doesn't hurt me, and even if it did, I'm not so. the credit thing, I've done a lot of movies, it's fine. I don't get real touchy about that. I mean, I know some people do. I really don't. So, I mean, that in this particular case, because Jennifer did such an exceptional job, and we turned out, it was hard to find people. I was lucky to get Jennifer. She's an extraordinary assistant and a really, really great person. So I was lucky to get her because I couldn't find a first assistant. My first assistants keep going off and cutting. My last first assistant co-edited the Weird Al Yankovic movie, and now his career is on its way. So now I lost him. So, and we had a lot of people because we'd bring in people that I can only give you 3 weeks. I can only give you a month. I mean, or somebody wasn't really qualified and we had to let them go, or, so a lot of people there's a lot of credits for assistants, but we really never had much help. Jennifer did so much of it on her own, especially at the beginning, because the way it was presented, it was like, oh, it's a little film. It'll be easy to cut. And, we're going to do it really fast. And you just need an assistant. You don't even need an apprentice. You don't even need any help. And then we're like getting 5-6 hours of dailies. And at one point they started shooting 5 cameras, and it was like, we need some help. I mean, Jennifer worked so above and beyond what was expected of her, without complaint, that I just thought it was a nice thing to do. I mean, she's just, and she, and Ben had confidence in her too, because Ben was in the editing room a lot. Because like I said, they were in our building. So he'd come in whenever he had nothing to do. He'd just drop in, or a couple of times I would come in the morning really early, and he was at the Avid playing around, doing stuff like, like, what are you doing there? Don't do anything I can't undo. And she gained Ben's confidence, which is not easy because, she really knows computers, and Ben is like a computer wizard at this point. He's constantly on the phone with the head. When you're Ben, you get to be on the phone with the head programmer at Apple. I said, how'd you get on the phone with him? He said, well, so that's, in this particular case, that's why.
And how about Carrie Oliver, who's listed as finishing editor? What does a finishing editor do?
I have no idea. I don't know who that is.
That's the best answer I've heard in a long time. I have
no idea who Carrie Oliver is.
Okay.
I'm assuming means the person in the DI, I'm assuming, is the person in the DI facility, which was Picture Shop. And I'm assuming it was a job there, but I don't really know the answer to that.
Well, that's okay. And that makes a lot of sense to me, and we're going to go with that. In the limited time we have left, I have a couple questions for you about directing. And the first one is about Mr. Affleck. Maybe I'll just combine these all into one big Uber question. You've worked with him for a while now, and not only is he the director, but he's also in the movie. He's also an actor. Tell me about the dynamic of working with him, how it might have changed over the years, and what it's like working with a director who's also an actor. How might that be different in terms of the way they look at performance and the way they look at editing?
Well, I mean, obviously every director is different, but the first film we did was Gone Baby Gone, where Ben was a first-time director. So he wasn't doing as much acting then because for whatever reason. And so when we did that, he was in the room all day, every day. We were working very much together, side by side, and as our relationship has evolved and he's gotten busier and trusted me more, he spends less time in the editing room, still a lot. So it's evolved that way. And then the first film I did with him when he was an actor and acting and directing, he had already done The Town, which I didn't do. So he had been used to watching himself. And I asked him, how did you get, he just by repetition, got good at that to the point where he'd be watching himself on Argo and go, he would be, criticizing himself. Why? Like he was another person, I mean, he's not crazy or anything, but he would be like, why are you doing that? Like, what are you doing? Oh, like that kind of thing. Mostly to be funny. So he just told me, even just doing one film while he's an actor, you see hundreds and hundreds of takes of yourself. So he got used to it, and I also know that he called several other actor directors. I think he called Warren Beatty and Kevin Costner, people like that, actors who had directed, and asked them for advice and, what are the pitfalls? And, I know somebody said to him, make sure you don't undercover yourself, because they said your tendency will be to shoot yourself last. And everybody's looking at you thinking you're an egomaniac and, look to do another take of himself. But don't let that affect you. Make sure you overcover yourself. And Ben would do some things on Argo, like where he would do a line like 50 times, like right in a row, because he's directing himself in his own head, so he knows he doesn't have to stop and give himself notes. He's already knows the notes. So he would just do it a lot of short lines. Sometimes he would do them over and over and over again, which is, so he had lots of different choices, which is great. And now that he has his company and there's so much going on with him and producing and head of a company, CEO of a company and acting and directing and involves a little bit with Jennifer's careers, and it's all the million things she has going on. And our relationship has also developed. So I think he has a lot more faith in me and lets me do things, trusts me more, that he, I don't know, it's a trust thing. I mean, he knows I can do it. So he has less of a hand in it. I mean, I'm not saying that he didn't. I mean, he did it. I mean, he definitely did a tremendous amount on this. I'm not trying to take credit for something that I didn't do. I mean, it's always a collaboration with him, but I think it's less an in-person collaboration. He'd come in and give me 100 notes and go, I got to go, and then, I'd do them all and send them. And, so it was a little bit more like that than it was like sitting next to me and going, I don't, what, he's much faster at things now.
So the last time we spoke was about News of the World that you did with Paul Greengrass. Yeah. And a question that we didn't have a chance to get to that I had was, do you have any interest in ever directing? And then here I am, we're getting ready to load that one up again. And of course, you are directing.
Yes, I am.
So tell me about what led to that, for the first time, you directing a film and why now and why this project, as much as you might be able to speak about the project.
Sure, and I can speak about the project. Right after I won the Academy Award, I got a bunch of calls from people, are you interested in directing? People saw maybe they could make money off me, like basically it was agents and managers. And I thought, I in no way think I'm ever going to be Catherine Bigelow or Ben or Paul or Michael Mann, anybody like that. But I have also worked with, along the way and seen films where I go, I could do better, but I could do that. Like I'd like to tell my own story, and try it. I mean, it wasn't like I was like I have to direct, but it just became more and more appealing as an idea to challenge myself. And then David Crockett, who was a producer on The Town, which I didn't cut, but Gone Baby Gone, and we got to be friends. And he was also a producer on Concussion, which I cut. He came to me with this story, and it's a story about this guy named Anthony Robles, who was born missing his right leg and went on to win the NCAA championship in college wrestling in 2011. And his story was so inspiring. And I thought, this is like I was saying earlier, it's like, I think people can use some inspiration right now. I think movies that inspire people I think are a great thing right now. There's so much darkness these days in the world. So we hired a writer to rewrite the script, a guy named John Hindman, who wrote a great script. We shopped it around, and then the pandemic kind of got in the way, and the project kind of lay dormant for a while. And then they came to me again, like, we're going to try and make this while I was doing Air, and you lose perspective after a while. So I gave it to Ben to read, say, look, even somebody in your company, I've lost perspective. Is this good? And he said, I'll read it. And I was like, well, I'm not asking you to make it. I'm just, I'm make clear. I'm not trying to force you in or make you feel uncomfortable. And he read it, and Matt read it, and they both loved it. And everybody at the company loved it. And they were like, we'll make this, And then never even thinking about it, really, he showed it to Jennifer, and Jennifer loved it, and her management loved it. So Jennifer agreed to be in it, Jennifer Lopez, and an actor named Jarrell Jerome, who was the lead in Now They See Us and won an Emmy for that. And he's an extraordinary actor, is going to play Anthony. And we're rounding out the rest of the cast with great actors and actresses. So Ben and Matt have been so supportive, and like, what a comfortable place for me to make my first film, where people I know have my back and, and know what good is, know what quality is, and they're going to support me in the way that, it's a dream to have the support that I have on this film as a first-time director. It's just, they're both incredible. And everybody at the company has been incredible. There's a woman who's just started working there named Danny Bernfeld, who's now runs their film and TV department or division, and she's been amazing. So it's like it's really a dream come true in terms of like, if I was going to pick a way to do my first film, this would be the way to do it. So, we start shooting in 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks. So we're well into prep, and it's a big learning experience, and it's been really fun actually, because I know I have such great support. So I don't feel like I'm out there on an island. It's been so far so good. Busy, but so far so good.
Yeah. Well, Billy, I don't know much about directing, but what little I do know is that directors are very busy people. So I'm going to let you go. But first, I'll just congratulate you on another great film in Air. It was a lot of fun. Congratulate you on your first big directing gig, and looking forward to talking to you about that. And promise me next time we'll just save a little time to work in some more questions about Richard Pryor.
Oh, wow. I'd love to talk about Richard Pryor. Anytime. Richard was amazing. I'll never forget that. I still have a note that he wrote me. At the end of the film, he sent me and the other assistants a dozen roses, and he wrote, if there's anything you ever need, you have it from me. And I still have that note. He was complicated, obviously, but it was an honor, a dream to, I admired him before and continue to admire him, and still listen to his records. And whenever I see one of his comedy, stand-up films, I watch it. That was special.
Well, awards are great, but I'll take that note over an award any day.
Yeah, no, things like that happen. And it's like I said, there's things that happen along the way or like you just never forget. And that's certainly one of them.
Which is better, an Academy Award or a note like that from Richard Pryor? I would take the note. Billy has both, and I have neither. But I did get a great interview with the one and only Billy Goldenberg, and I'm pretty happy to have that. Thanks to him for taking a few minutes out of his very busy directing schedule to talk with us today. Hey, Ben Affleck has an Avid at home, and you can too. All you need to do is visit avid.com and check out a very low-cost annual or monthly subscription. I would go with annual. And then you can have an Avid media composer of your very own. And if you act now, I'll put a link in the show notes that'll take you right to it. Well, I hope you enjoyed our visit with Mr. Goldenberg. It has been nice having so many repeat guests on the show lately, like Billy and Dan Lebenthal and Nate Orloff. But I'm going to try and work in some new voices soon. Who will it be? Well, come back next week and find out. Until then, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.